And away we go. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Wherever you happen to be in the world today, welcome one and all to Coffee Talk. That's right, it is time once again for Coffee Talk Live, where we will be looking at some snips from the news and having some discussion about what is going on in the world today. Of course, if you are listening somewhere and you'd like to join the live portion, you can find us on Coffee Talk at Prepper University at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Friday on YouTube. And that is at Coffee Talk Live and at Prepper University. You can also find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, and that is at Coffee Talk Chat, as well as fistfulofradio.com, podcasting out of Atlanta Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and Friday at noon. Joined today by Little Girl and by unnamed cat that was dropped off at her house. There he is. Unnamed cat. He's doing much better, though. His paws is still scabbed over, though. Both front paws have scabs. I'll show you here really quick since I've got him. If you'll hold still. See? Not the rear paws, just the front ones. And the person who dropped the cat off came back to ask about it. And apparently where they actually found them was in their car, like in the engine block. So they drove to work. They heard screaming like that. And Kitty's in there clinging to something. So that's what happened to him. Just as well that I got him now. He wants to go and play, so that's fine. Go on. He wants to play on the floor with Little Girl. The cats are being nice to him now. But for the benefit of those of you who are listening and not able to see, I do try to read through as many comments as I possibly can, and I'll go ahead and say hello to some of the people that have joined us here today. I see Helter is here, as well as Tuck, Dragon. I don't know if that came up because it's being sluggish. That's all I need. Here we go. Brian is here. Raccoon. Fluke Man has joined us here today as we get ready to jump off into the world of, there he goes, jump off into the news. He's on the floor now. Yeah, Tuck says poor kitten. Yeah, he had a rough time apparently, separated from wherever he came from, burned up in the engine block of a car, and left at the mercy of a little girl in a box. Because like I said, this woman came with this little kid. It's not her daughter. It's a niece or something. And they had him in a cardboard box with a little tray of water and a chicken bone. And I was like, yeah, he's not even going to drink out of a tray right now. He's too little. He's starting to get to that point now very quickly, but that's because he's being well fed. But anyway, as we switch around, you all remember Bishop Lamar Whitehead, right? You remember Bishop Lamar, or the Bling Bishop? Bling Bishop, anybody? Ring a bell? He's been sentenced officially. Daily Mail article. Bling Bishop Lamar Whitehead is sentenced to 9 years in jail. So he's back in prison again for fraud again. Brooklyn's Bling Bishop Lamar Whitehead will spend 9 years behind bars for a litany of crimes, including defrauding and extorting his own parishioners. The 46-year-old church leader was found guilty in March of 5 counts, including wire fraud, attempted extortion, and lying to the FBI, stemming from 3 separate schemes. Whitehead, who became notorious for the luxury suits he wore and the Rolls-Royce he drove while running the Leaders of Tomorrow International Ministries in Canaries. Man, that's a mouthful. That's like one of them African churches. You ever notice that with the churches that are African? They have these really, really long, drawn-out names. The Leaders of Tomorrow International Ministries in Canarsie. Is it Canarsie? Has been held in custody since Judge Lorna Schofield revoked his bail last month. She admonished him at the time for making false statements about law enforcement officials and his victims on social media, and hit out at Whitehead again on Monday after he pleaded for her mercy. I don't see any remorse for your conduct, Schofield said, adding that he did not seem to appreciate the effects his crimes had on his victims or even the basic fact of the case. And here he is outside of the courthouse, I guess, in his Burberry jacket. Stuff's not cheap. He dressed very expensive. He really did. Among the crimes Whitehead was found guilty of was conning Pauline Anderson, the elderly single mother, out of $90,000 of her retirement fund. He had promised to buy her. He had promised to help her achieve her lifelong. A promise to help her. Yeah, I see what happened here. I got all tongue twisted because the sentence is out of order. The structure is wrong. So I'll fix it. He had promised to help her buy and achieve her lifelong goal of buying a home, but prosecutors said he instead spent the money on shopping sprees at Polo and Louis Vuitton on payments for a BMW. When the victim's son eventually attempted to get or recoup his mother's funds, Whitehead said in a text message he was asking God to exact revenge upon the man. Okay. And here's another shot of Whitehead there. And he is close friends with the mayor, by the way. Close friends with the mayor, who is also under scrutiny for all sorts of things right now. As I catch up a couple of comments here really quickly. Flukeman says, glad he still has his claws. Hate it when people in vets declaw their loving pets. Well, you know how they do that, right? That's some pretty dirty business when they declaw, because they basically have to cut the whole tip of the toe off. So I don't do that. Monkey is here, as well as JD. He says, with a name like Bling Bishop, I knew he was going to be a skillet. Yeah. And Tuck says the churches with the 16 long marquees out front. Yeah, the African churches, they always have these super long names. But Bling Bishop Lamar Burton, fried like an egg here, 9 more years in prison. And again, I mean, he's been in prison for identity theft and fraud before. This is not his first rodeo with going to jail for stealing other people's money or identity or spending other people's money. It said prosecutors said the bishop drew up fake bank statements to secure a $250,000 loan, claiming he had millions in a company account that actually contained less than $6. He was also accused of attempting to extort $5,000 from Brandon Belmonte, the owner of a Bronx auto body shop, after a repair job. Okay. And that is, there he is with Mayor Eric Adams, who again is no stranger to being under scrutiny these days. He's under a federal investigation. Oh, the FBI seized his phones and his computer. And his campaign manager and some other people that work with him have had their homes searched by law enforcement. And there's something funny going on, but remains to be seen whether or not he ends up in trouble as well. Brian says he looks like the Riddler with that suit. Yeah. And Dragon says false prophets come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. Yeah, they don't even put on the sheep's clothing. They present themselves as a wolf and say that they're going to be a vegetarian. That's what they do. That's what they do. Something else I wanted to get around to here really quickly, while I've got it fresh in my mind. And this is another Daily Mail article, isn't it? I think it is. Another Daily Mail article here about those utopias, those utopian cities that they keep promising to build in California. Update in billionaires' bid to build new utopian cities in California. There it is. The move to build a new city in rural California has reached a significant milestone after qualifying for the proposal to be put before local voters in November. But the group backing the plan, named California Forever, must convince voters to get behind their plans of turning 50,000 acres in Solano County into a city. Now, you might remember us reading about this a few weeks ago. In Solano County, there was lawsuits being placed against the farmers who this land was purchased from for extorting money from the company that's trying to buy the land, from these tech billionaires that are trying to build these 15-minute cities, claiming that they banded together to try to drive the prices up on their farms. And it's like, well, and from my perspective, I'm like, yeah, you know what? No, don't walk on the keyboard, honey. Come here. If you're going to force these guys to sell their property, if you're going to squeeze them out, then yeah, they should try to get as much money as they can. I don't see a problem with that. But those farmers ended up getting sued and having to pay really heavy fines. So they lost out big time on these land sales. They got screwed. But now it's getting ready to come up for vote. And as I've pointed out before, I'm convinced that the lawmakers in California are deliberately trying to sabotage the state to sell out to these people, that there's a lot of money going behind the scenes. Article goes on to say, led by former Goldman Sachs banker Jan Schramek, California Forever wants to turn the land into an old-fashioned walkable city that could grow to 40,000 residents. Imagined as a largely middle-class utopia with safe neighborhoods and high-paying jobs, the group claims it already has eager businesses lined up. Yeah, I'm sure they do. The group must now convince voters to get behind their ideas, which is already facing opposition from local leaders, environmental groups, and locals alike. Well, those locals got screwed. As I had just pointed out. But like I said, we read that article not too long ago. And Gary Edwards has joined us. Glad you could make it today. Talking about the utopian cities that they're trying to build in California. And again, large abandoned areas in San Francisco and other locations that these billionaires are buying up for pennies on the dollar. And when the farming community where they bought this acreage, 50,000 acres, tried to fight back, they themselves ended up getting sued and losing. They got crushed. They got squeezed out of their land, and they got squeezed out of the money that they made when they were forced into being in the position of selling their property. Opponents point to a recent poll they conducted that found that 70% of those surveyed were skeptical of the move. Former Solano County Supervisor Dwayne Croman told the LA Times that there is a litany of reasons to oppose the project. Or it's Crom, actually. So Conan's God. Crom said among these is the county's longtime commitment to keeping development confined to existing cities. All they have to do is rezone it. The local lawmakers vote to rezone it, and the people that live there are screwed. I mean, that's how that works. While Representative Mike Thompson penned an op-ed against the project in his local newspaper, Thompson, a Democrat, wrote, "I strongly support efforts to increase the number of good-paying jobs, implement clean energy, and provide opportunity for our region. But these efforts require sound public policy that works with our community, not lavish promises that may never be realized." Oh, they'll build it. They're going to build it whether you like it or not. It'll get done. Whether or not they can maintain it is another story altogether. Basically, what they're trying to create here is a middle-class housing project, essentially. And history will tell you that these systems tend to fail. They tend to fail when you pen people up like this. Flukeman says, seems like their plan to hike up property tax, decriminalize shoplifting, drug use, and etc. to build their own overpriced, luxurious cities is going ahead. Yes, indeed. Gary says there's a war on small farms in the United States and in Europe. And JD says high-paying jobs and middle-class community. Don't you need an income of like 180,000 in California just to live comfortably? Yeah, at this point, I think you're right. And Helder says 15-minute cities are the new plantations. Well, it's serfdom. It's serfdom all over again, where you live on the Lord's land and you come and go at his discretion because he controls the property that you live in. He owns that house. You work there, you farm there, and you pay the tribute to the Lord of the manor. If you want to go somewhere, you're attached to that manor and you need to seek permission. And it's winding the clock back to that time period, unfortunately. But that's the direction that we're going in, and there's a lot of push for it with the same old promises. This is the same promise they always make. And when you see development in any community, they sit there and they say, oh, well, it'll bring jobs and it'll do this and it'll do that, and it'll bring in tourists and whatever they promise you. But what they really mean is, we want more tax money and we're willing to sell the community out in order to get it. Because that's really what it boils down to. Selling out for tax money. And in this case, selling out for God knows what. With these lawmakers, I would not be surprised at all to find out that they're on the take behind the scenes and that they're destroying California on purpose so that these billionaires can buy up the land really cheap and do whatever the hell they want. Dragon says if only all the billionaires lived together in one city, it would certainly make things easier for some purposes. Yeah, and I have no problem with someone being a billionaire. My problem is when they're trying to tell me how to live. Go be a billionaire and enjoy yourself. Leave me the hell alone. Gary says check out the Bruderhof communities. They fuse socialism and capitalism on a local level. And Tuck says he knows someone in LA who works 2 jobs plus side projects, and his wife works and they have an apartment. It sounds like when I was living in Boston, paying $2,000 a month for an apartment. I kid you not, and the rent goes up every year. $2,000 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment. And man, did I have to bust my ass to maintain that. Plus utilities, except for the water. Water was always included in the rent. I don't know if it's still like that now. Now, this is this particular article. It's a semi-environmental article, but it's got a spin on it. And I think it's interesting because I actually know about this story. And I like how they twist it to make it sound like something else. And this article is from a site called Care Doctor. Care Doctor. It says ecological vandalism on an industrial scale. Millionaire faces massive fine after bulldozing over a mile of waterway near his home. Okay. So, and there you see the image. There's the picture, right? And this happened in the United Kingdom. It says it's widely assumed that large corporations are the major destroyers of our environment. And while that's still generally true, this story proves that individuals can also cause significant damage. One man in the UK impulsively decided to dredge the bed of a natural river and remove several trees near his home. This decision not only destroyed the river's natural and rightful composition, but also landed the man in jail. Anyone in the UK, are you familiar with this story? You know where I'm going with it? The River Lugg flows through Wales and England before it meets the larger River Wyre downstream. It's home to a wide variety of wildlife, including crayfish, trout, salmon, otters, and many species of birds. At 63 miles long, the River Lugg has been an important part of the local ecological system for more than 1,000 years. For the past several decades, the UK Environment Agency has monitored and attended to the historic and beautiful river to ensure it continues to flow for another 1,000 years. In December 2020, English multi-millionaire John Price took it upon himself to change the natural ecosystem of the river where it passed by his home. He dredged the riverbed, removed the natural gravel, and cleared over 1.5 miles of vegetation along the river's edge, leaving the riverbank absolutely devastated. Okay? When asked why he felt the need to destroy the ancient river, Price claimed he was trying to protect his own and his neighbors' properties from flooding. However, it's become clear that the work he did to the river would not have prevented any future floods. In fact, the trees he cut down on the riverbed he destroyed would have far better protected the properties. Okay, so they're telling you that this guy impulsively, it says in the article, impulsively decided to redirect this river. It still goes where it's supposed to go, but he redirected it. Okay, and I'll catch up a couple of comments here. Brian says liberal states and their high cost of living. Exactly, because they tax the crap out of everybody. And Delo is here. And Gary says corporations hate self-sufficient communities because they're similar to labor unions, which can hold corporations accountable for their actions. But back to the article. I know this story. And that's why I wanted to look at it. And it's really interesting the way they spin this to make John Price look like a villain who's he paid a massive fine, and he's going to do like 10 months in prison, 10 months in jail for redirecting this. It was not done impulsively. He was asked to do this by the community. The community has been getting flooded out by this river for years. It's ruining the villages. It's basically destroying the villages there, and has been for some time. And they've been petitioning apparently for it to be redirected. And the government's like, oh, well, tough shit. We can't afford it. So he got fed up and did it himself. I'll redirect it on my property. I'll pay for it. And the community now is, or the village there is upset because he's sitting in jail for this. In their eyes, he saved their butts. Even though the article claims that there's no evidence that it's going to prevent future flooding, apparently it already has. And I just think it's fascinating the spin that they put on this kind of stuff. And I see that Urban Angst has made it today. Glad you could pop in. Tuck says the river is only 1,000 years old, mighty young for a river. Interesting. It's probably an artificial river in the first place, because even back then they were digging them out. And Gary Edwards says corporations redirected generated wealth of local economies into the pockets of the elites, who then used the wealth to buy off the politicians who used building codes to disallow affordable housing. And he goes on to say corporate-controlled government uses the zoning regulations to strangle self-sufficient communities in the womb. But to me, again, this article demonstrates a lot of spin. They're villainizing it. They're saying, oh, look, this person, he created an ecological disaster. And did he really? Did he really, or did he fix something that the community was asking for and wasn't getting any cooperation from the local government? Which doesn't surprise me, because it's the UK. Because it's the UK. They're about as bad as the United States. Someone said the other day that if George Washington knew the direction that the United States would be going in now, he never would have fought the British. And I'm like, well, you know, the UK is no better off than we are. As a matter of fact, it's a little worse. It's a little worse. So I don't know if that's such a great idea. You might remember yesterday, if you were watching, or if you watched it after the fact or listened after the fact, we were talking about Biden and his freezing moments that he's been having a lot of lately, where he walks around and freezes up, looks confused, and has to be redirected. And we showed the video clip yesterday of him at his fundraiser in Los Angeles. It'd be nice to see a fundraiser for Los Angeles to repair the damage that's being done. But no, we're not going to do that. fundraiser in Los Angeles so Biden can make more money because Democrats. And he froze on stage, and we show the video clip, and I have the video clip pulled up here, where Obama walks up to him, takes him by the wrist, gives him a tug, and then gets alongside of him and puts his hand on his back and gives him a little shove and guides him off the stage. Okay? There's been several freezes like this recently. I'm sure you've seen at the so-called Juneteenth celebration. You remember the Juneteenth celebration where he stood there frozen while everybody else is jamming. And then, of course, the G7 summit where he wandered off and the prime minister of Italy went and grabbed him. You remember this? According to the White House, that's fake news. Never happened. Never happened. New York Post article. White House makes wrong claims while accusing Post of misreporting Biden videos. So White House went on the offensive against the Post Monday for calling out President Biden's frailty in a series of recent videos only to make false statements of their own in the process. Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre accused the Post of spreading misinformation about videos of the 81-year-old president at recent events with G7 world leaders and former President Barack Obama. Those events included a Thursday video of Biden being corralled by Italian PM Giorgia Meloni after a skydiving demonstration and a former President Barack Obama escorting his former VP off the stage at a glitzy Hollywood fundraiser Saturday night. Jean-Pierre called the clips cheap fakes, meaning to claim they were altered by humans through techniques such as zooming in and leaving out context, but also incorrectly calling them deep fakes, referring to AI-generated footage with altered subjects and audio. Quote, I think you all have called this the cheap fakes video, and that's exactly what they are. They are cheap fakes videos, and they are done in bad faith, the press secretary said at her regular briefing. And some of you news organizations have been very clear, have stressed that the right-wing critics of the president have a credibility problem because of the fact checkers have repeatedly caught them pushing misinformation and disinformation. That's a very jumbled sentence. Jean-Pierre then applauded the conservative Washington Examiner for kissing Biden's ass. I'm sorry, it says for obstinately supporting her claims, although the publication merely quoted British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak trying to explain Biden's actions. Which his quote, I believe, is he just went over to kind of talk to all of them individually, and Georgia was saying, don't worry, they're all coming to us. We were meant to line up so they could come and then shake all of our hands, which he's not really discrediting. But Jean-Pierre says that those videos are faked, that they've been altered somehow. And I have seen altered video of it, but the altered video is being done by the so-called liberal media, whereby they are doing massive close-ups and cutting away scenes rather than showing the entire film clip. And like I said, I still have it pulled up, and I'll show the film clip from, I'll pull up the clip from when he was on stage with Jimmy Kimmel and President Obama, former President Obama. I'll pull that one up. And then I'll show you the G7 summit clip because I have that as well. Let me read a couple of comments here really quick. Tuck says his country has hundreds of miles of waterways and only a fraction are original, and even those are heavily modified. Yeah, a lot of those rivers and creeks and everything you see, man-made all over the world. Raccoon says it's embarrassing. And Tuck says never happened except there's copious amounts of proof. And then Savage says D-Day celebrations while he crapped his pants on stage. Yeah, allegedly, evidently. And Urban says he recalls an old interview with Obama about a possible third term, and he stated he could do it, but only if he had a stand-in. Too bad Biden can't stand on his own. And one more here. Helter says Pierre is telling people to reject the evidence of their eyes and ears. It's the most essential command. So I'll pull that up one more time so that you can see it for yourself, because this is the unedited footage taken from someone's cell phone camera during the event. And is that queued up? Yes, it is. I'll go ahead and run that for you. The music is blaring. I turned it down. He's standing there with his arms in front of him like he usually does, looking confused. There's Kimmel on the left. Obama on the right. You see he grabs his wrist, pats his back, pushes him, and guides him off the stage. And in the video that I've seen, they cut away. They cut away, and I'll run it one more time. They cut away just before Obama touches his wrist, and they pick it up right when he's about to walk out of the curtain when Kimmel's behind him. Right there, they cut it. So you don't see him grab the wrist and tug him and push him along. You see Joe shuffling there. This doesn't even look like he's going heel to toe in all of his steps. He's kind of shuffling. And then right here, they pick it back up. That would be edited footage, and that's what I've been seeing on certain news sites. Let's put it that way. But that was the actual footage. And Dragon says the only cheap fakes he sees are coming from the White House. And Gary Edwards says D-Day or Depends Day. Well, that depends. It's bladder control. Bladder control. I don't know if he wears a diaper or not. So I'm going to jump to the other one here. This is the G7 summit. I do believe there's a video clip attached to this, which is why I pulled it up in case no one has seen it. No one has seen it. Gary Edwards gives us flashbacks of Star Trek, invoking Star Trek, the original 60s Star Trek. He says in the Star Trek episode, Patterns of Force, an elderly world leader is controlled by drugs. Yeah, that's when they were emulating Nazi Germany. And that guy was out of his mind and heavily medicated. I remember that episode. This one is also from the New York Post. Biden wanders away at G7 summit before being pulled back by the Italian prime minister. And because they were doing a demonstration. They were doing a demonstration with skydivers. And the skydiver, of course, he came pretty close to hitting the mark. Let me pause that real quick. So I'll expand it and show you. He came pretty close to hitting the mark. The guy did a good job. But Biden wasn't paying attention, and he walked away and he was staring off into the distance. As I'll demonstrate that in the video here in a moment. It says President Biden started to wander off during a skydiving demonstration at the G7 summit in southern Italy Thursday, with the host nation's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni pressed into action to pull him back towards the group. As the leaders of the world's wealthiest democracies, applauded the evening parachuting presentation, the 81-year-old U.S. president's attention visibly wandered away from where the others were looking. Biden appeared to miss the action happening right in front of him as he shuffled a few steps away from his fellow heads of government, turned the other way, and appeared to say something to an officer who was packing a parachute in the background. Okay, so let's see if we can get this pulled up proper. I'll go ahead and expand this. There comes the skydiver. He lands on his mark or close to it. They're all applauding, they're all looking, and Biden is looking somewhere else. Now, a couple of other guys turn to, I guess, see what he's looking at, and this guy is looking like he's wandering over. Should I go get Biden or what? And then the Italian prime minister grabs his arm and turns him around and points. Now, look at Biden's face. Tell me he doesn't look confused. That's really the key to it for me right there. Not even so much that he wandered off. Not even so much that he wandered off like that, but the confused look on his face when he does get spun around. Let me wind that back. I'll try to. Now it's acting wonky. I'll try to pull it back. I'm looking at an alligator now. No, I'm going to have to reboot the whole thing. Let me close that. Let me close that. So I don't know if you, I went ahead and shut it out because it was causing some connectivity problems. It was causing some connectivity problems. But apparently that's all fake. Again, the skydiver lands fairly close to his mark. He did a good landing. He was just off by like less than a foot. They're all watching and applauding. Biden turns, looks almost in the opposite direction. A couple of the other world leaders, as it were, turn and are looking at him, and I guess they're wondering, what's he looking at? One of the other leaders steps over. He starts inching his way to the left, like, should I go get him? And then Maloney, like, I got it, walks over and grabs his arm and turns him. And then he gets back into position. And my wife made a comment about that. She says that when they're dealing with Biden, he should never be on the side. Because everywhere you see him, he's on the side somewhere. He's off to the left, off to the left. You ever notice that? Off to the left. He should always be in the middle of whoever's up there so that they can box him in case he gets weird. I was like, that's actually a good point. That's a pretty good point. And Tuck says he took care of an Alzheimer's patient and it looks familiar. Yeah. And Raccoon compares him to C-3PO just standing there. Because he does that. He stands there and he's got his arms kind of out like this. He's just... Because, C-3PO couldn't really straighten his arms. So he always had him kind of in front of him at this angle. But it was the look on his face when he was turned back around. Just total confusion. Like, what am I doing again? Where am I? Am I still in France? And Urban says, for me, it's not so much Biden's confused look as the posture. Yeah, the outstretched, downward, frozen like a robot that just ran out of batteries. And as Tuck had mentioned, something I'm familiar with as well, because I've seen that before. I worked in mental health. My wife and I both worked in mental health for a couple of years. And dealing with the inpatients there, I've seen that frozen stance. And they do that. They slope their shoulders forward. They don't stand in a normal erect position. Their arms are kind of like this, kind of hunched forward so that they're like in front, like they're on an elastic or something. It's pretty strange. And I think it has something to do with the medications. AJ says money is just paper with a number on it. It's cotton, actually. Or if you're in Australia, they make it out of vinyl now, don't they? Isn't the money like plastic? Dragon says it looks like the both of them are asking, where the hell are we? He might not know. I mean, I've joked about it before, and I brought this up yesterday. I've speculated that a lot of what he does, it could be for plausible deniability so that he can fake it. One of the best Saturday Night Live sketches of the late 80s back when SNL was still funny, was Phil Hartman playing Reagan. And he would be like, "Oh, well, I'm Ronald Reagan, don't you know? No." And, act all silly and goofy. And then when the door closes, he he'd snap out of it and turn into someone completely different. The voice would change, commanding attitude. The wall would open up, and all these people would pour into the room. All right, now pay attention this time, and open up a billboard. And he has the pointer out, and he says, "We're going to move this money here. We're going to do this. We're going to do that." And they're like, "Reagan, please, you're going too fast." And I always speculated there's a possibility of plausible deniability there. But man, if that's the case, he is a great actor because he really looks like a dementia patient. Fluke Man says maybe nobody wanted to stand next to Biden, so he's always standing outside of the group. That's a possibility. That's a possibility. But like I said, it seems like he's always on the left. Always on the left. Unless he's with the Pope, and then he wants to press his forehead against him, which is also very weird. I showed that yesterday. Walks up and leans into the Pope and kept coming and put his forehead right on the Pope's forehead. And the Pope looked so confused. He looked so confused. All People is here. He says Biden is faking senility so that he and his son do not have to serve prison terms for the financial and sexual crimes. Yeah, and like I said, that was something that I had speculated on before plenty of times. And it could be totally plausible deniability. He could be completely faking it. Who knows? Brian says, stands to the left. I see what you did there. He is always on the left side, though. He is. Oh, and there is a little girl, for those of you who can see, sitting on top of my printer. How you doing, dear? No, you're ignoring me? That's all right. Little girl on the printer, everyone. Congratulations. Gary Edwards says the Manchurian Candidate or the Mandalorian Candidate loyal to Disneyland. Yeah, he's the Mandalorian Candidate. The Manchurian Candidate is Dwayne Johnson. I'm still on that. I think that's my big foil hat conspiracy theory that Dwayne Johnson's the Manchurian Candidate. The only problem with him is, though, he's lied about so many things that now people have lost interest in him. So if he runs for office, nobody's going to like him anymore. No one's going to like Dwayne Johnson anymore. And I'm convinced he's using steroids too. He says he isn't. He says he experimented with it when he was a kid, when he was a teenager, but then never again. But every wrestler says that. Hulk Hogan said that. Hulk Hogan says that. Oh, and it's not going to let me open the article? Uh-oh. Having a problem. Hold on a second. My article is being... Is that the right... Fisker? Is it Fisker? Fisker is a company that makes electric vehicles. And let me see if I can get that pulled up properly. Here we go. See, I had it on the Los Angeles Times, but the Los Angeles Times was trying to force me to subscribe just now, which I will never do. So I'll go to another article. And this is from Inc., which is a Business Insider kind of newsreel. Here it comes. Troubled EV maker Fisker files for bankruptcy. Stymied by a faulty product and a slowing EV market, Henrik Fisker's second car company hits rock bottom as rival Tesla considers price cuts. And I'll tell you why I'm talking about this in a minute. Startup EV maker Fisker Chapter 11 bankruptcy filing marks the latest and most doom-struck move in the company's downward financial spiral. It's a sharp decline in the fortunes of founder Henrik Fisker's second attempt at cracking the flagging EV market, where even prominent brands like Tesla are resorting to price cuts to boost sales. In early March, Fisker cut its workforce by 15%, paused investments in future projects, and said it predicted a difficult year and was seeking a manufacturing partner to help it turn the business around. Shortly after that, it announced a 6-week production pause for its electric vehicles and said it was raising $150 million by selling convertible notes in an effort to dig itself out of an ongoing cash crunch caused by weak consumer demand. The company even admitted it lost track of millions of dollars worth of customers' orders. California-based Fisker struggles may have come to an end. TechCrunch reports the company filed for bankruptcy in Delaware District Court with estimated assets of between $500 million and $1 billion and liabilities of up to $500 million. Now, why am I talking about this? Let me catch up a couple of comments here really quick. I see Baki is here. He says, 90s movies taught us kids good values. Watching Ninja Turtles, it covers fatherhood, controlling your anger, standing up to bullies. I miss content with a clean, good purpose. I don't blame you. I'm sure many of you are aware, my wife and I, we only primarily watch vintage television. I've got a ton of DVDs back here. You can't see it. You can see it over there. In that corner, those are all vintage television shows. And then I've got vintage Saturday morning cartoons and anime and stuff like that. And we've got tons of movies, all older stuff, all movies from the 40s all the way to the 90s. Nothing being made today is worth even watching. Brian says all those professional bodybuilders, including The Rock and Arnold Schwarzenegger, use steroids. Paul says, you're awesome. I always enjoy your show, staying frosty. Well, I appreciate that, Paul. And Fluke Man still on Biden. He says if Biden isn't acting, then someone has to take responsibility for all the illegal activities like illegal immigration. Who would it be? Kamala Harris, the vice president? No, she doesn't know what she's doing either. She doesn't know what she's doing either. But the problem with Fisker is that all of these EV vehicles are proprietary. This is not the first time an electric vehicle company's gone bankrupt in the last couple of years. It's happened several times, including most of the manufacturers of electric buses, transit buses in the United States, and a couple of manufacturers of transit or electric school buses. They are very expensive to maintain, very expensive to repair, cannot be repaired by a standard mechanic. Your average automotive mechanic, diesel mechanic, can't touch an electric vehicle. They wouldn't know what to do with it. Okay, it doesn't operate on the same principle at all. So you have to have specially trained people to work on these vehicles with proprietary parts. It's not like when Buick or Mariner went out of business and Ford bought them up and said, yeah, okay, if you have trouble with your Buick, you can bring it to us. We'll take care of it. And they've absorbed them because the engines are similar. Or you can get parts. You can go to eBay Motors. You can go to a junkyard. You can't do that with an electric vehicle. That's why there's transit buses and school buses, electric, that are mothballed all across the United States. They break down and they can't get the parts and they can't get anybody qualified to fix the stuff. And then they reach out to the company and it's gone. It's bankrupt. So you're stuck with a $500,000 piece of junk that practically didn't work anyways, and now it's useless. So all these people, anyone who owns a Fisker vehicle, when they go belly up, they're not going to be able to get parts or service. So the first time something goes wrong, they've got a $70,000 paperweight, or however much the hell these cost. No one is going to be able to repair it. They're not going to be able to get parts for it. And they're screwed. They're screwed. And they can't write off their car. It doesn't work that way. And this keeps happening to people with electric vehicles. It keeps happening. And Damien says, yes, excellent. Are you talking about our choice in television? Gary Edwards says they bought the vintage Time Tunnel TV series. That's a good one. And Baki says that's perfect, a classic collection. Yeah, that's what we do. We don't watch modern stuff. Rarely. And when we do, we're either disappointed, we're we're sideswiped by agenda, or it's so vulgar. There's so much foul language or sexuality. We don't want to be bothered. We don't want to be bothered with it. And right now, and we watch it in the right format. You know, for those of you who are new to my talking about this, the way it used to be done back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever, we don't binge watch anything. Like you see up here, oh, you saw it up there. That big orange box up on the top, that's the complete Dukes of Hazzard. One episode a week, 2 years to get through that. There's the original Monty Python up there. Sapphire and Steel, Taxi, the original Star Trek, Space 1999. A lot of shows you might recognize. We're currently watching The Prisoner with Patrick McGowan. We're watching Knight Rider, which is a silly show, but it's fun. The original Buck Rogers with Gil Gerard, 1978, 1979 Buck Rogers. Fluke Man says, can EVs be fixed by another EV manufacturer? Not with proprietary parts. You can't exchange them. And there's no, you know, it's not like I said, you can't go to a junkyard and scrap salvage parts. Dragon says, just one of many to fall, trying to beat Tesla at the game they made is never happening. And then Tuck says, even good modern shows are disappointing because they shut down mid-story. And Urban says, not enough episodes of The Prisoner. Well, you know, The Prisoner is actually a spin-off of a spy show that was starring Patrick McGowan. And they tie together. He was doing a spy show before The Prisoner. And The Prisoner ended very abruptly because they canceled the series. And they never got back to it, really. And then Gary being funny here. I'll put that up real quick. But yeah, The Prisoner was an interesting psychodrama. And the last episode is really wonky, though, to be honest. But what are you going to do? What are you going to do? But yeah, we again, we prefer to watch vintage shows. Are You Being Served is a great one. We just finished watching that not too long ago. The original 70s Upstairs, Downstairs, which is brilliantly written. Not the modern one, not the remake, but the original Upstairs, Downstairs really talks about history of that time period accurately and contrasting opinions between upper and lower class people with valid points on both sides. It's interesting to watch. And Baki says the only new shows they watch are Game of Thrones and Walking Dead. And Raccoon said, I have the first Knight Rider box set in the collector case with the working kit light feature and the zoom zoom sounds, and it still works. It was an interesting show, and they were smarter than Dukes of Hazzard because Dukes of Hazzard destroyed a lot of cars. Every car they jumped, they destroyed, to the point where they got they couldn't afford to buy cars anymore. There's only so many Dodge Chargers you can run around and buy. They were reduced to going around to supermarket parking lots and leaving notes on people's windshields. Hey, we're interested in buying your car. With Knight Rider, when they do those jumps, they have several cars. They have the car that they drive. They have the show car that Hasselhoff sits in for the display purposes, the shiny, nice, pretty one. And they had an aluminum one that only weighed like 150 pounds. It was just a shell, and they would launch that sucker out of a big air cannon, and that's how they did the jumps, because they didn't want to have to keep buying cars over and over again. Fluke Man says, do you like Married with Children? Think that's the one with the main character always makes fun of fat women. I did when it first came out. I don't know if I would care for it now, because I'm about fed up with shows that depict the father as being a moron. Although everybody on the show was an idiot. I don't know how well it would hold up now. I haven't seen it since it was on the air. I haven't seen that since it was on the air. But yeah, ended up talking pop culture there, but that's okay. But I don't have Married with Children or anything like that. But we got TV shows for a lifetime. We got TV shows for a lifetime. And you can always go and watch them again. Because again, like I said, we watch them one at a time. Gary Edwards says he's a fan of Rockford Files, The Invaders, Hawaiian Eye. You mean Hawaii Five-0 or Hawaiian Eye? Man from U.N.C.L.E. and Better Call Saul. How about UFO? Gary Edwards, you're in the UK, right? How about UFO? Or how about anything else from Jerry Anderson? Super Marionation? Gary Edwards, like Fireball XL5 or Stingray or Thunderbirds, anything like that. And Raccoon says bitchy wife and whipped goofy husband is so cliche. Yeah, and then stupid kids. I mean, it's an entirely. I don't want to see a dysfunctional family anymore as I've gotten older and realized how much society is mirroring that now. You know, how weak they've gotten, how bad they've gotten over the years. And some of it could be from influence from stuff like that. Could be from that sort of an influence. I got one more here for you. One more article real quick. Daily Mail article. And you all saw this coming because it's been coming up. Chicago has talked about doing this. So has California. Now it's in Seattle. Seattle to use illegal migrants to reinforce depleted police force. Okay. And this sign right here is what drew my attention to the article, where it says dreamers belong here. I can't stand dreamers. You know why? Because they freaking asleep. Dreamers are sleeping and they never accomplish anything. All they do is talk about their dreams and how you're holding them back. Kiss my ass. Seattle has become the latest Dem-run city trying to replace an exodus of police officers with illegal migrants. Washington's largest city has 913 police to service 750,000 people after losing 725 officers in the last 5 years. Why is that? You got rid of them during the BLM riots to act like you're diversified? You fired them for not taking the jab, maybe? You made them afraid to do their jobs because they thought they might get sued? Now it's the police department has tweaked the rules to allow applications for migrants who cross the border illegally as children and are registered on the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals or DREAMers program. Yeah, great. And under a law change signed by Democratic Governor Jay Inslee in February, and that's him in the picture, they can be chosen above an equally qualified candidate if they speak more than one language. Radio host Jason Rantz tells News Nation Morning in America, I think if you have anyone who's qualified and willing to do the job, including qualified Americans who speak another language, they should be treated just as equally as everybody else. So each person who shows up for an interview has to admit to committing a felony. One retired officer wrote on X, a federal trial should take place prior to any hiring, I would assume. And what he means is if you cross the border illegally, you've committed a felony. That's what he's suggesting. And Damien says, so we have a foreign police force now. Isn't that not so good? No, it's a very bad idea. And then Brian says, Seattle has turned into a mess. Yes, they have. There you go, Gary. He says, Fireball XL5, UFO, and it is UFO, not UFO. Thunderbirds, Supercar, Astro Boy, Clutch Cargo. Clutch Cargo, that's a reach. That's going back. Yeah, right there, Gary. You see that one strip next to the door? And you can probably make it out. Supercar, Fireball XL5, Stingray, Captain Scarlet, Joe 90, Secret Service, Terrahawks, Thunderbirds. That's the Jerry Anderson collection right there, all of his Super Mario Nation stuff. Most of that was not seen outside of the UK. I think the only one that made it to the US was Thunderbirds. And Dragon says, cartel infiltration coming soon. This already happened in California. There you go. There you go. And with that, I'm going to have to go ahead and start wrapping things up. We are at the top of the hour. Again, you are listening to and or watching Coffee Talk, and you can find us live on YouTube Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time if you're listening and you wanted to join us there on Coffee Talk and Prepper University. You can find me on X at Coffee Talk Chat and fistfulofradio.com, podcasting out of Atlanta Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and Friday at noon. So thank you, everybody who was able to join us here today. Hope you got something out of the conversation.